Last year in Mrs. Badulak's class at school in 4th grade, I learned how to do exponents with math.
Yeah, and why was that very important?
It's very important because, well, first of all, I thought it was very interesting because it was fun to do and I made up problems for myself, and it was important because Mrs. Badulak told us how we're going to do harder problems in middle school and high school, so that would help us get ready for the harder problems we'll get with division and multiplication.
The first one that always comes to mind for me when people ask me this, and because I'm in education, I guess people ask me this, is when I was in college. I was like a sophomore, and I was a sophomore, and I was walking up the stairs of Palmer Hall, which was one of those, old typical college buildings, stone stairs, the whole thing, stained glass windows, all that stuff. And I was talking to a professor, and we were talking about something that had to do with my class, and it was Victorian literature. And all of a sudden, I literally stopped in the middle of the stairs, and she's like continuing up the stairs. I was like, wait a minute, this is like the same thing I'm doing in my philosophy class. And so I started like making all these connections. So suddenly I saw that all of my classes actually connected together, and they weren't just these weird discrete units of things. Like, wow, this is kind of cool. I mean, it was like I suddenly realized what the whole point of college education was.
I don't know. I don't really think about learning that much, even wireless learning. No, I don't actively think, oh, I'm learning things.
So, when I was a student, I was really involved in university at Smith College, and I remember the moment when I learned just how oblivious I was to the amount of wealth and privilege I had. So I grew up in what I considered a pretty normal but comfortable family, pretty affluent actually, and I went to Smith, and we were sitting there in our group meeting, and we were watching a little video about wealth. I remember when they were saying something like the amount of money that Americans spend on bottled water in a year in contrast to the amount of people without access to clean drinking water. And I had like a bottle of water in my backpack at the time, and I was just thinking like, wow, I'm just oblivious to the amount of money and like that I spend on myself, and the things that I think of as just routine or necessary or small, and like how much that accumulates to like how much I take care of myself instead of others. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this has to change. Like, my understanding of like the world is so different all of a sudden.
I would say probably, obviously elementary school and then middle school is okay, but high school is completely irrelevant and useless. And if they actually wanted to have a useful school thing, they should teach people how to fix cars, and they should teach people how to do their taxes, and they should teach people how to cook and how to do all sorts of other shit instead of how to make a bag at home ec. So I'm starting to think now that school should not just only be about academics, it should also be about actually preparing you for life, so that you don't come out of high school and you're completely retarded. Like everyone's like, well, how are these kids going to get out of college and be okay? It's like, stop looking at that and go back and look at high school, maybe even middle school. Maybe middle school should just be like completely that and not even academia anymore.
I think it's some of each, sometimes in a formal setting, and often, probably, I'd say about 50-50, but rarely in the classroom. Like if they're in formal settings, they're with speakers or discussions or things like that.
Yes, I think that outside of school is more what you like to do, and inside of school is more what you have to do to turn out, have a good job, and everything. But, like, outside of school is how you get to a point where you can use your knowledge that you learn in school to get a real job and to live in society. They're both very important.
Yeah.
It's funny. I had, when I was I've been in classrooms a lot. I've been in a lot of graduate classrooms, but I have I remember one time when I was in graduate school the first time around, I was sitting in the library and I was writing, I was a writer, so, we could do whatever the heck we wanted. And we would just find sections of the library that we thought looked interesting. Like this time we were in the chaos theory section. Things about chaos and physics and stuff we knew nothing about. And we would sit on the floor, it would be 2 or 3 of us. We would just start pulling out books and reading them and picking up elements that we could use in our writing.
That's really
and we learned about that stuff along the way. Like then we started to go to like the science lectures on campus and stuff like that to try to find out more. So it was kind of funny. And we said at the time, I remember one of my really good friends and I were literally sitting on the floor between stacks of books, and we're like, why can't school be like this? Why can't we just have a pile of books or whatever, and we'll just sort of start going through whatever we're interested in, because that's what we were basically doing. We're like, hey, I heard about chaos theory. I'd like to write a poem about it or a story about it. And let's go find out what it's really about.
Yeah.
Numbers and letters.
Numbers and letters. Why numbers and letters?
Because letters, first of all, are in every subject. You have to have the letters all put together, even in math when you have algebra. And numbers, that's in math. That it can also be in reading, because you can count your stories that you've read, or you can count the vocabulary that you have in your vocabulary book.
I don't know, I guess I really I value my academic education. I think it's important that I learn how to think and write, and I definitely had a number of insights there, but I don't consider them to be of universal importance to me. Like, the things that I think are really important are things I've learned with family, with friends, in a faith setting, like places where that are more important to what I think of as far as like the ultimate, really important things.
Yes, I do. I actually should say that, all of the computer science that I know, I learned from the books that are sitting on my desk or in there, or from asking Doug questions or whatever. And I definitely feel like if I had gone through a particular sequence in a class or a series of classes, that I would feel more comfortable about what I know. The only time I ever feel really comfortable is when I realize how much more I know than the people I'm teaching. Even though I feel like if I were to try to teach you something, I couldn't teach you anything. You know more than I do. At least about computer science or, particular programming language or other programming languages. And Doug, I could never teach him anything, So there are areas where I think had I had that formal training, I would feel a lot more comfortable, say, talking to you about something to do with programming. But I'm fine talking to 9th graders, or 10th graders. I know a ton more than they do, but I still so I recognize how much more I have to learn and how much my knowledge is really pieced together in ways that may not be, it's just taking me a lot longer, I think, than it would if I had to do it, if I did it in a particular sequence. And I'm not sure that every discipline has to function that way, but certainly for like math, science, computer science, I think it definitely helps to have that kind of scaffolding that a class or series of classes offer.
It's probably like Major League Sports, where everybody complains that people get paid too much, or it costs too much for tickets, or it costs too much for admission, and then instead of it ever going down, it just keeps going up and up and up, and then eventually sports become very unimportant and people start to lose interest, and it's just annoying. Then I'm going to have to now pay $20 for standing room only at the Phillies, and now I'm going to have to pay $20,000 to go to Temple.